that is how affairs start. I don't think they start all the time because you see this smoking hot woman and are just going to throw away your whole life to go chase it down.
Yeah.
Starts because of a hurt. Starts because of an emptiness. Starts because something feels insignificant inside you and you start to get it from a well that is not your own.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Naked Gospel. It is our hope and vision to see a revival of sexual integrity and dignity throughout the entire bride of Christ. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. Today we are joined by Jay Holland. Jay is a pastor of 20 years. More specifically, he's got 4 kids. He's fostered a ton, he's adopted, and he's just got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to parenting, so much so that it's kind of his expertise. He's got his own podcast that says, it's titled Let's Parent on Purpose. I would recommend everyone to check that out. And so today we're just going to be looking at parenting and pornography, but also just like relationships and what it looks like to steward a relationship with your kids as well as with your spouse. I am really looking forward to it, and it's an episode that we haven't done before. We've never actually just engaged parenting, so I'm glad you guys are going to join us. If you enjoy it, would you leave a review? That helps us a ton. It keeps us going. And if you know somebody that would benefit from the conversation, I'd recommend that you just share it with them, whether it's just a fellow parent or somebody you know is parenting, or even your own folks, whoever it might be. I think a conversation like this is really beneficial because we look at culture in a lot of ways as well as parenting and just what our kids are going through. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Jay, thanks for being on today, man. I am really excited to have this conversation. You've been a family friend for a while. You were one of my dad's students back in the day, and you've been pastoring for a long time, and just really thrilled to have you on because you don't just have the angle of being a parent, you've also been a pastor, and you've really explored parenthood in a lot of ways. So just wondering if you could kind of just share with our audience just who you are and just your history a bit.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, my name is Jay Holland. I grew up in West Virginia, lived there basically my whole life till I went away to school. Since then, have lived in West Virginia, Tennessee. I'm currently in South Florida. I've been here about 13 years, married to Emily. We have 4 kids, 2 boys, right in the middle of 2 girls on the either end. Actually just got to celebrate my daughter's graduation from high school, and she's got her associates already.
That's cool.
We did a drive-in parade at our church since all of the graduation services were canceled, and it was actually way better than listening to somebody from the Board of Education give a speech that nobody wanted to hear. So I've been a pastor for about 20 years now, primarily working with students. And when you say working with students, as life has gone on, I've realized more and more that means working with mom and dad. I had maybe an epiphany somewhere along the way that I'm an awesome youth pastor when there's a spiritually engaged mom and dad already involved. And if there's not, it's a total crapshoot. I remember the first time a mom ever asked me for advice as a youth pastor. I was about 21 years old. And I remember thinking, you are crazy. Like, why in the world are you asking me about parenting somebody who's like 4 years younger than me? Yeah. But I got to experiment parenting wise on, a whole group of kids before having my own. And it's been helpful, and it's still an absolute challenge. Every one of them is different. Every circumstance is different. And so it doesn't even matter if it's my first kid or my 4th kid. I feel like I'm walking into it brand new in each context. There's a little familiarity with it, but man, all of it, human beings are weird little creatures, and
yes, we are.
They take some nuance.
Yeah. So when it comes to parenting in particular, what has been some of your story there? I know it's not just been something that you've practiced outside of the home, but something you brought into the home, and you have kids now and whatnot. So share that a little bit as well.
I think that one of the most helpful context is thinking about my dad. So I grew up in a Christian home, and In no way was my dad perfect, but I can say this. My dad made it easy to think of God as my Heavenly Father, because my dad was loving, my dad was steady. I was the youngest of 5 kids, so I got to watch. I had a couple really rebellious older siblings. I got to watch my dad be stern with them. I got to watch him discipline them, but then I also got to watch him break down weeping because he loved them so much. When they would storm out of the room or out of the house, I got to see that tender, broken heart of the Father. And so, when you have a dad like that, and then you start hearing language of God as your Heavenly Father, it's like, well, of course I want to be with my Heavenly Father. Of course I want to. And then in the same context, as I got older and I began to meet and have close friends whose dads were the opposite, I found that even when they came to Jesus, the idea of God as Father, while important to them and hopeful to them, when things got bad, their default was to kind of cower in fear instead of running to the Father. And so I think primarily right at the core, the job of parents is to reflect the heart of God to their kids, and to be a steward of this little human being, or these little human beings that have been created in God's image. They're not my kids, they're God's kids. And I get the pleasure of getting to spend a good bit of their life in my house and do the best I can to reflect Jesus to them.
And you have 4 kids now, yeah?
I do. Yeah, we have 4 kids. I was married right out of college, and my first wife passed away in 2005. We had a little girl together. Then I married Emily after that. Emily adopted my daughter, Brooklyn. We've had 2 of our own. And then we got involved in foster care and had a number of kids in our house, some for very short term, some for a year and a half, and then ultimately adopted a little girl out of foster care as well.
What's her name?
Her name is Hannah.
Hannah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, she's a fireball.
I believe you. I think that perspective is really helpful. Parents are meant to reflect something really good and beautiful to us, while at the same time that when that isn't the case, there's something fundamentally broken at our view of God. My dad's the man. I mean, he's still one of my best friends, and it's been cool in my adulthood to get to know him as brother and not just as son. But even, I mean, I was just a crap kid. Pardon the language. I was just a mess and just awful. But he would cry with me when I'd come home with burdens, and he would get in my face when I was, when I was not treating my mom the way I should. It's funny because it's hard to actually describe my conduct at that time without using stronger language. But yeah, I just was not a good person, and to see how present my dad was that in that process is. It's still light to me, right? It's something that like Jesus has illuminated in a lot of ways and just teaches me so much about the way he's present with me. So I resonate a lot with your story. I guess this is probably a good traversal point. We can kind of go in 2 different directions, but I guess kind of getting some of the bigger questions out of the way in the beginning, like how do you even understand maybe parenting? Like what is parenting? I think a lot of people are parents and thus just kind of take it for granted that they are parents.
Right.
And so but then it's almost like this kind of like shoot from the hip kind of style. And I was wondering if there is any kind of like call or mandate or prescription upon parents to parent well, and what does it mean to maybe parent intentionally? Maybe we can say that.
Yeah, man, it's a fantastic question that I wish I had if I could bottle the answer to that, man, we'd go to Tahiti together and sit and talk about it on the beach.
Sweet.
And rake in all the dough. So, there's some sense in which like parenting, it's easy and it's obvious. And in another sense, like it is the hardest thing that you do. And I have had talks with friends where we just wonder, is it harder now than it's ever been? Like something's got to be harder for our generation than the ones that were before us. And so I think like you're shepherding a heart, you're training for competency, You're reflecting the heart of Jesus. You're also protecting and providing. Hopefully you are modeling marriage and a healthy marriage. And in modeling marriage, bigger picture than that, you're modeling the picture of Christ and his bride. So you're giving them in a great context, in an ideal context, you're giving them a healthy picture of what the Father looks like. You're giving them a healthy picture of what it means for Christ. Men, I know most of your listeners are men. What does it mean to be the leader in a biblical terms? It means you're the first one to die. You're the first one to lay yourself and lay your life on the line to die for the sake of everybody else around you. That's what being king of the castle means if you're truly trying to follow God. You're giving a picture of mutual submission. It's not just, wives submit to your husbands, husbands love your wives, but my wife and I are brother and sister in Christ, even before we're husband and wife. And at some point in our eternal lives, we won't be husband and wife anymore, but we will be brothers and sisters in Christ. And in the same way, eternally, I don't know how it works. Like, are my kids always my kids? Are my parents always my parents? Not real sure. Kind of hope so, but I don't know. But I do know that my mom and dad, like you were talking about with yours, they're my sister and brother in Christ. And right now, 3 of my 4 kids, I think I can say that pretty confidently about. And we're praying fervently for the other one. So it's a complex job, full of failure. And I think that you have to have grace with yourself. I think you're right. You have to be very intentional because you never drift into something really good, so you have to be intentional. But at the same time, it has to be a real grace-based intentionality, because nothing ever works like you think it's going to work.
Right.
And kids don't respond just because it's not like a TV show or a sitcom where, just because you put together a 2-minute monologue of the perfect words changed everything. It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It strikes me that kids are both extraordinarily fragile and extraordinarily resilient at the same time. And you can't necessarily dictate in a given moment which one they're going to be. Right. Yes.
And it's so confusing which things are which. My kids, so, in our family, I have a son who contracted leukemia at 5 years old, and we walked through 3.5 years of leukemia treatment, and he endured hundreds of injections, and literally took oral chemo every day for 3.5 years, steroid treatments, lost his hair, got it back, lost his hair again, all of this, no immune system, had to be, live in a bubble basically in our home for a long time. And he endured all of that really with very little complaint about his cancer treatment or any of that. But man, you can say a little bit of a harsh word to him and he'd melt down. Or, you cut video game time short and it's the end of the world. So it's weird, but you're right. I think it's good to remember that they're resilient. And I don't know, they're probably all going to need therapy in this world at some point or another. So just resolve to it. I think every one of my kids and all of us have sat through counseling at some point or another. So humble yourself, go ahead and just assume that you're going to go to the doctor. If you live in the 20th century, you're going to need counseling for you and your kids sometime in the journey. And look at that as a grace that's available.
Amen. Oh, shoot. How is your son? How is he? I assume the way you're speaking, he made it through. Is that
a safe assumption? He's doing great. We actually this weekend just celebrated his 12th birthday.
That's awesome.
So he has been, they don't call it cancer. They don't call it cured anymore with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. But as far as detectable cancer, he's been cancer-free since 2014. We still have about a 3-year window left, 3 to 4 year window left of every couple of months doing a blood test to make sure that it doesn't come back. still hold our breath every time we do that, but he is strong. He's healthy. He's got to play football and soccer and, be in school and just be a kid, just be a regular kid. And, but at the same time, he's got this little scar, right on his chest above his heart where, he had a port installed because, they give them so many injections, they'll burn up all their veins. So they install this rubber port underneath their skin to where they can continually stick the needles in. And so kind of neat, that scar represents, life through death. You put in chemo to kill a bunch of things, and at the same time, it gives you life. So a lot of really cool gospel parallels that we learned along the way in his treatment. But just by God's grace, he's doing well. And if we talk too much about it, I'll just start crying.
No, that's heavy stuff. I am likely to start crying with you. So I'm just honestly glad that he's doing well. He sounds like a really rad dude.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. So when it comes to parenting well, it makes me wonder if there isn't a connection between parenting well and being kind of married well, like the marital relationship and then the parental relationship, and wondering if there isn't a kind of connection there, because I saw not in any, like, there was no detriment to my parents' marriage when I was going through my stuff, but I did see strain, and their need to discuss without maybe me in the room, those kinds of things that were really kind of just fundamental. Otherwise, I think it would have been a lot harder if they didn't practice just being one in the midst of like trying to love me and be present to me. But that's just like literally like just me looking in hindsight. So I was wondering if you have the same observation, or if you think that's the case at all.
Yeah. I think that households that are centered around the parent-child relationship are a house of cards waiting to fall. Households that are, like, let's say Meta, we're centered around Christ. Okay. So I know that's like saying a lot to say, let's just take that as a given, but let's say those that are intentionally trying to follow their faith and then intentionally trying to center their lives around Jesus, even still, you have homes that, tend to center around the parent-child relationship, and just so many problems come from that. Not that you're going to avoid problems, but a home, I think, needs to be centered around the health of the marital relationship. At some point, these kids, God willing, are going to leave your home. And when they do, what happens so often is somewhere along the way, you see parents basically ended up staying together. If they did stay together, they stayed together for the sake of the kids, and then they've got nothing left by the time it was done. At the same time, like you were talking about, you have a child, there's a really good chance that they're going to go through a rebellious period, or you're going to go through tragedy, or you're going to go through calamity, or all of those. And you need a tight marriage. You need an intentional marriage. You need to develop the systems and rhythms and practices that will help you to pursue one another, to stay connected. Because honestly, like when the bomb goes off is a really hard time to get your marriage in order. Yeah. So now if the bomb's gone off and your marriage is not in order, get your marriage in order. That's not an excuse. You still need to do that. It's just going to be really hard. So, in our case, my wife is incredible. She has, she married a grieving husband who, I lost my best friend and my wife. And my wife was secure enough to marry me and be my friend through that as our relationship grew. She adopted, the brokenhearted I can't remember if Brooklyn was 4 or 5 at the time. She's walked through basically 10 and a half months straight of her little boy in the hospital, living in that fear. And at the same time, it was during his initial 1 month of cancer treatment, Elijah's cancer treatment, that we ended up actually getting to finalize the adoption of our little girl. And she was hard. She was really hard before we adopted, and she didn't get easier because we adopted. And so I can tell you, like in our circumstance, it has been constant work, and I don't mean work in a bad way, but I mean very intentional work to stay connected, to figure out the times to be together, to make sure that the kids know that mom and dad are a team. You know, the whole house is a team, but the initial core team is mom and dad. And so you can be on that team or you can be against that team, but you're not going to come between that team. And so, yeah, you have to prioritize the marriage, and then the kids feel safe. I remember, I don't know if you remember him or not, Shane, Dane Emmerich, who was a pastor at Liberty University. And he used to do our church camps all the time. And so I remember something that he said that stuck with me so much. And I don't know where the study came from, but it really stuck with me. It said the number one need of a child is not to know that mom and dad love me. The core need of a child is to know that mom and dad love each other and are not going to get a divorce. And then the number two need is that mom and dad love me.
Yeah.
Because I think they see if mom and dad love each other, it just puts a security in everything else. But how many homes do you see where, the parents really, really love the kids, but the world still gets shattered because mom and dad split up? So yeah, but it's hard. You love somebody, but the feelings and emotions of love are different than establishing the habits, patterns, and routines that are going to keep you bonded over a long period of time.
Oh, so much there, dude. Thank you for sharing all of that. I recall at different times when I was at my worst trying to divide them because I'd get more leniency. Maybe they'd be concerned with each other, or maybe like I'd get one to, agree to something that the other one wouldn't know about. And it never really worked. But I recall there was I was older by this point. I was probably 19. My folks lived in Tennessee. I was still up in Pennsylvania, and I had gotten the life that I wanted. I was living with some friends. We'd throw parties every night, and I just, so they called one night. I answered the phone and I talked to them, and they're just like so much love, like, Shane, like, we miss you, we love you, how are you? And I'm just lying to them because I love that they love me, and I'm just like, oh, like, life is good, like, thanks for checking in. It's like a 2-minute conversation, and there's this party taking place outside the door. I'm in this room, and it's just this dark room. There's this party taking place outside. It's everything that I want, and I'm in this room talking to my folks. After 2 minutes, I get off the phone, and I just start crying because they were this oasis in this dark room. I found this oasis when I was talking to my parents because they were together, and they loved each other, and they loved me. And nothing outside of that room could touch the conversation that I just had with them. And I felt so empty, like so very empty. And it was the significance of their union. And in their union, they would decide to be just my parents, like, sure, you can't, it's seemingly arbitrary as far as we're concerned, like which kids end up with which parents, but they were my parents. And I was just so humbled. I was devastated that I wasn't with them, just devastated. So that was good for me. I needed that, but that I mean, speaks directly into what you're talking about. Like, I saw them together first, and that they together would actively just be my parents and love me and give themselves in my direction. That's the stuff that like really started to thaw my heart.
And, maybe this is encouragement for any mom and dads that might be listening who have a rebellious kid. You felt all that, but I bet you didn't go into that with them in that 2-minute call. You probably didn't.
I didn't call them back.
Like, man, you just don't know what kind of witness you're having to me right now. I feel my heart thawing. No, you don't. You may not, like, they may find that out now. I don't know. And you never know which of those interactions stick, but some of them do, because the Lord's involved in it too. He really is. And, but yeah, it's like a farmer plowing a field, planting a seed. And, there's a lot of work to be done before you ever see any kind of growth there. And so, God bless your mom and dad.
Yeah, they're amazing. That's worth saying. Your pastoral giftings are coming in right now. Yeah, no, that is absolutely worth saying. So thank you, Jay. Okay. a little bit of a transition, kind of moving from some of those bigger pictures into, I guess, more specificity when it comes to. So I'm a millennial, and there was like so much reaction to millennials. Like, I don't mean reaction in a bad sense. People kind of freaked out because there's like this new demographic, this new milieu was created because of like globalization and technology, and so much time and energy was spent into understanding millennials. So much so that like at this point, it like takes a lot of work for me to think that there are younger generations. That they're like actually generations that are below me, and that they are growing up in something different. They have different music and different things that inform their imaginations, different things that inform their ethics, and different stories for dating and for the purpose and meaning in life, and a different frame of reference for even like being a kid, like what does it look like to be, parented. And so I think parents are uniquely disposed to appreciate maybe the stories and the narratives that their kids are growing up with, because they actually have to invest time and energy into that. Otherwise, I'm entirely oblivious to it. And it's only in the moments like right now when I take a step back and say, okay, like that's altogether different than the stories maybe I grew up with, or the things that have shaped and formed me. And you are a parent. So I'd just be curious when it comes to, even it can be something as specific as like sexual ethics and pornography, or something else entirely. But when you as a parent look at the stories of your kid, what are some of the things that you see?
Well, let me give you some frame of reference here. Do you remember the first time that you held a genuine smartphone in your hand, or at least your first interaction and experience with it?
I think I do. Yeah.
Okay. You may not remember the exact day, but you can get pretty close to that time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. My kids are never going to remember that. They're never going to remember their first interaction because they don't remember life without it. I remember my son, who's 12 now, was the busiest little boy in the world. I mean, he was thick. Like he was, we always joke that like, when he nursed, he was just getting half and half the whole time. So like he was just this big, thick chunk, but he was always on the go. And then I remember he must have been 2 years old, and I got my first iPhone and I installed Angry Birds on it. And he sat down and, opened it up, and within a minute or so figured out how to play Angry Birds. And we marveled at how intelligent he was for figuring out how to play Angry Birds. We got this little genius on our hands. Now, looking back and what I know about design and everything else at this point, I marvel at the engineers that figured out how to create a program and a device that a 2-year-old could pick up and use instantaneously. Yeah. But the thing is, like, he's never going to remember life without it, and neither are any of the others. We are, my generation, and really to some extent your generation, we're digital immigrants. They're digital natives. They just like it. They don't know life without it. In addition, we spoke about this a little bit beforehand. One of the major things that I realized too, let's talk about just the fight for purity and morality. I remember being a teenager and, being a lusty boy and just obsessed with girls and obsessed with all of that. But I was also a believer. I was also a Christian. If you wanted to see pornography, you had a couple of different options. At least like this was my context, and a lot of people that I know that are my age, it was their context. If your parents didn't have HBO or something like that, you would have those cable channels that were scrambled, that sometimes were only a little bit scrambled. So like you could like sit and wait up if everybody went to bed in hopes that it would be like partially scrambled, because they played dirty movies at night. The other was everybody had a friend at least who had a dad who had a stack of, Playboy magazines or early magazines. And so you wait till they're gone, you raid their closet, you find the magazine, or you have a big brother, an older brother that gets you a magazine, something like that. And so you have it, but you also have to hide it. You also you have to really hide it, because if you got, parents that are good at finding good hiding places, you really better hide it. But at the same time, you would feel conviction, at least in my case, like I could feel conviction And so when I felt conviction, I would like get rid of or throw away whatever pornography I had access to. And then if I wanted to get back there again, there was a tremendous amount of work that it took to get to that. So it's not that pornography wasn't available. It wasn't that these things weren't an option, but they took work. And I had to work to find the immorality and pornography in that context. And now it takes work to keep away from it. I had to chase pornography, and now pornography is chasing me, and it's chasing my kids. You know, my kids right now, I have two boys who are 10 and 12 years old. And I can tell you at this point, they really have no desire to look at naked women. Like they're pre-puberty, at least for the next 3 days they are. And that's just not their thing. You know what they want to do? They want to play Fortnite. They want to play Minecraft. Like that's their world. They want to watch stupid YouTube videos of Dude Perfect or people playing Fortnite or Minecraft. Yeah. And there is a whole world out there who's pursuing them. And so, I think one of the challenges as a parent is I can't keep up with the hive mind of every evil person in the world that's trying to get after my kids. And I can't keep up with the hive mind of all of the kids in school and all of the different ways that they've figured out to get around every safety and every block and everything else. And so I think one of the real challenges of parenting in our generation is we don't have a really good context and frame of reference for how to do this. There's a lot of things that you learn from your mom and dad. You either learn because they did a good job on it, and so you can try to emulate it, or you learn because they did a bad job on it, and so you can try to correct and find another example, or at least not do it the way they did because it really screwed you up. And now I don't have that frame of reference with so many things in my kid's life. I don't have a frame of reference of how much internet time they should have because the internet really didn't hit until I was in college. Right. Telephones were stuck to a wall, to a cord. And so like you had to go around a corner, you had to hide in a closet or whatever, and you could get into trouble on the phone, but you know what? There wasn't a digital imprint of it. It didn't last forever. Yeah. And there wasn't visualization. So I have told kids in our youth group, I said, you need to realize some of this, it's on you. First off, you've got to give your parents slack because they don't have a frame of reference. They can't remember what their mom and dad did because it's a whole new world. This stuff didn't exist. Yeah. And so some of them are going to be too permissive. Some of them are going to be hyper controlling. And my kids would definitely say that we're on the stricter side. And I would say I'm reasonable and probably liberally reasonable. But that's because I've been a youth pastor for 20 years and I've talked to kid after kid after kid after kid after kid who has been exposed and addicted to this stuff. Yeah. And then I get involved in sheriff deputy investigations of, kids exchanging pictures and stuff like that. So like I live with that world of terror. But I have to tell kids, like, you have to give your moms and dads grace because they're trying to figure it out. And about the time they get it figured out, the whole technology changes. The latest social app changes or the way to access this stuff changes. And so one of the things that I have tried to work hard to do as a student pastor and as a parent is to say to my kids, hey, it's on you. It's not on your mom and dad. It's on you. You don't get to stand before God at the end of time and say, well, if my parents had just put better filters on my stuff, then I wouldn't have done this. It's a problem. You need to have the courage to walk up to them and say, hey, this is an issue. Yeah. Now, at the same time, on a mom and dad side, you cannot, especially with purity and morality, you cannot authoritarian-based parent. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but you know what I mean there. You can't fear-based parent. They're going to be guilty at some point over the course of, 8 years old to 18 years old. They're going to be guilty. They're going to feel guilty. They're going to feel embarrassed. They're going to feel ashamed. And if they get caught or if they come to you, what they need is humble grace. What they need is a reaction that doesn't make them just want to bury the problem deeper the next time it comes. And so I try to think back to the context of again, my mom and dad and stuff like that. There are things that they could catch me on, that there are things that they could catch my siblings on, that they could just, bust your butt, absolutely bust your chops, and rightfully so. But there's a difference in like running around and sneaking out, and like, we would egg houses and stuff like that. Or, just stupid stuff like that, or not doing chores or whatever. I think there's a difference in busting somebody's chops for that stuff versus busting them over moral struggles, because there's a spiritual side that's tied up in a way that's different than everything else. And the enemy just wants to bury them in secret, and then it becomes a lifelong struggle. And so it's hard, Shane, it's very hard. And again, humble grace with your kids, but also with yourself, because you are not all powerful and you're not smarter than every evil human being in the world that's trying to get after your kids.
It's like a thousand thoughts to that. That's really, really good, Jay. I mean, even as an adult, I've had to learn I've had to like self-learn how to engage technology with like ethics, it's like, because technology isn't just neutral. Like it's not just like how you apply it. Like the lighting itself does create like a knot in our prefrontal cortex that like inhibits a lot of like memory and sensations and emotions, our ability to be present. Like we're addicted to stimulation, like just because of the lighting, and a lot of us like watch YouTube just to go to sleep. Or like watch porn to go to sleep or whatever, Netflix. And it's like, that's robbing us of our ability to be human in a lot of ways. And it takes like something like 72 hours without a blue light screen to like, for that knot to start to like, just relax and release.
Really?
Yeah. It's crazy. So like, I really appreciate what you're saying, because it's been a big part of my own journey. I think something like, Andy Crouch's TechWise family.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, it's really helpful here, because he just, it's really all about that, like how to be a family in the midst of this technological era that we find ourselves in.
Yeah,
I really like that.
So there's what is the book? Parenting with Love and Logic. I think that's what it is. And they talk about this other parenting tendency that happens. And anybody watching on YouTube, you're going to get the benefit of this incredible visual. Everybody else, you're going to have to memorize. It's called the cone of responsibility, or the V of responsibility. So just imagine a V. And so what happens in a child's life is when they're little, we don't mind giving them a bunch of choices, because the consequences don't really matter. Do you want the blue cup, the red cup, the green cup, the gold cup? Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Do you want to wear this? Do you want to wear this? Who cares? It doesn't matter. And you start adding as you go along, and you give them a lot of choice, and so they're used to a lot of choice, but you don't really care, because the consequences really don't matter. It's like, if they're polite to me and they say yes sir, why should I care? But the problem is, like, if you have raised your kids giving them all kinds of choice from the very beginning, like, you need to give them choice, you need to give them the power to choose. You need to give them a solid yes and a solid no. Not that they can defy you all the time, but like, you need to build your children's no. It's very, very important to build their no and to honor their no, because you're an authority in their life. But at some point, somebody else is going to be the picture of authority in their life, and they might be asking them to do something bad. The authority might be a 7th grade boy, and your kid is in 5th grade or 6th grade or 7th grade. So you need to build their no, and you need to build their choice. But the problem is, a lot of times what happens with parents is we give far too many choices when they're young, because it's a lot of work to limit their choices. I got to think about it. And I don't care about this choice. Play any of these 27 games. Yeah. But as they begin to get older, and especially as friends start to matter more, and then especially as freedom starts to come, they're used to having a lot of autonomy, and they're used to having a lot of decisions. And then a lot of times what happens is mom and dad will, they'll realize, oh, wow, they've got too much authority. And so you start, instead of it being a V that just slowly gets bigger and bigger as far as responsibility and choice, you rein that in. And that's where you get the resistance from a kid, and it's because everything is relative to all of us. And that's the same thing with kids. Like there's two different relatives that they're going by. It's what have I experienced in my house up until this point? And then also what is all my other friends getting to do? Totally. Well, you know what? Like, I don't really care what all of your other friends get to do. And I remember my parents saying that to me, and I didn't like it, but it's true. I really don't care what your other friends get to do because they're all going to be social degenerates and I'm not responsible for them. Yeah. But so I do have that. What have you experienced in my house? And so if you can, as best as you can over the long term, give them slow choice, slow responsibility, add choice appropriate with age, then you don't have to rein it in so bad. And then you don't get so much resistance. Because we all know kids who grow up who are healthy and well-adjusted, and they're in much stricter homes than other ones. And they're fine with that. They're fine with the boundaries. The thing that seems to really mess with kids is when the boundaries get moved all the time. And that's the same with us. Like, imagine you as an adult in a job, if the rules of your job changed every week based on the whims of your boss, probably be aiming to find another job real quick. For sure. And same thing at home. If the boundaries keep moving, it's unsettling. However, sometimes I've screwed up as a parent. My boundaries have been too big. My kid can't handle it, and I need to move them. But you parent with relationship, and you have to make those decisions. And sometimes what I have to do is just go to my kid and say, hey, you know what? This is actually on me. I screwed this up. I was wrong to do this. I wasn't prepared for this. And so I got to move it in. I know it kind of stinks. I'm going to ask your forgiveness for my foolish decision in the beginning. But I love you. I'm proud of you. And I know that you can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, some of the most formative experiences for me as a child, when my dad would come and he'd get on his knees and he'd say he messed up and would I forgive him? You know, and I would know that, like, even in the situation he's talking about, like, we were both wrong, like my heart was so hard, even if he was reacting to me poorly. But that he would just say, like, he wouldn't come and say, I'm sorry, but, like it wasn't an opportunity for a corrective, he wasn't subtly trying to be passively rebuking. Like, he would just own it and he'd get on his knees and say, son, like, I did wrong and I love you and you're important to me and I am sorry. You got
a good dad. That's really hard to do. You got a great.
I am not a father, and so I can't appreciate that entirely. I can't appreciate it hardly at all. All I know is that it formed me deeply. It shaped me in big ways. And I like a lot of what you're saying, because even the way we construct home is significant. Like, I mean, like the living room, like as its name would suggest, is where you do a lot of your living. But we orient that room around a television, we orient it away from each other. We're not even, like, the sofas are facing a kind of a portal to a world that doesn't exist here, away from the people that are present to us. I had a friend, he pointed out that we look at somebody like Solomon and either we look at him with judgment or with envy, but he had just a ton of wives and a ton of concubines. I mean, he had like sex on tap, right? He could have it whenever he wanted, however he wanted it. But like again, going back to the iPhone, that like we have thousands of women or men in our pockets, right? So we literally walk around with a harem in our pockets that would make Solomon blush.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
and like, you can be on point for 23 hours and 50 minutes of every day, and in about 60 seconds be in the worst place you've ever been. Yeah. And it's not just that is a constant tension, but it's also demoralizing. But guess what? You don't have to stay there. And I think that's the good news. Like, it's not just, it's hard. You can lose your appetite for that stuff as you gain appetites for other things. Like I have lustful struggles. I have eyeball struggles, but most of the things that are out there are completely unappealing to me. And it can get that way. And I think that even in my walk with Jesus, I don't feel holier than I did when I was 17 years old and in high school. I know objectively, like I'm pursuing Jesus much more. I'm living a much more intentionally moral life. I see the righteousness of God more. And so I don't feel like, oh man, I'm so much closer to Jesus comparatively than I was 17-year-old Jay. Now there's still a big chasm between me and Jesus, but I can tell you this, even though I have eyeball struggles, even though I have sin struggles, they're not the same struggles that I had at 17, 18 years old. They're not that. I got to a point where just casually friends, female friends, were just they were my friends on one level and they were just a commodity to devour with my eyeballs on another level.
Yeah.
It's not that now. And I think that's something that people need to hear. Like, you're always going to have a fight, but thank God it doesn't have to be the exact same fight that you're having now. And that's really encouraging. Like, you can progress in this, and it's, a lot of it is appetites. What you feed will grow, and what you starve will die.
No, that's a good word. I think there's an elegant kind of simplicity to it. I have a friend. So when I was, 19, 20, I moved in with this family, and this family just loved me back to life. I, in a lot of ways, needed to learn how to accidentally be their son before I could intentionally be my parents' son. And I think I led a Bible study one night, and he came to me afterwards. He was like, "Buddy, you did so good. You did so good. I'm just so proud of you." He's like, "Tonight, if you're willing, consider giving me your computer, because I found that in my life of ministry, whenever I have this big event, this big spiritual event, afterwards there's a fragility to my soul, and I'm more prone to just being taken advantage of. So whether it's an actual attack, or I'm just frail, and so I'm more exposed to the normal sort of attacks that don't affect me but all of a sudden do because I'm weaker. Either way, just maybe consider giving me your computer, And I just blew my world apart. I was like, that's so insightful. And so there a lot of things, especially what you're talking about, where there is a kind of an intentionality that comes along with it. This is a little bit of a tangent, because because you shared a story with me earlier, because there are only spaces inside of us that Jesus can fill, right? And you're talking about appetites, and I think that's really good, because stillness and abiding, those are the hardest spiritual formations for me. Yeah, I've talked before that I can. You tell me to memorize scripture or read scripture or just go serve people or whatever, but tell me to just be still without any stimulation, and that's the stuff that really freaks me out. We had this guy named Matt Fradd on not too long ago, and he was talking about how there was a moment recently how he had this desire in his heart, and his impulse was to go to his wife, and it wasn't even sexual, it was just some way of wanting to be known. And his impulse was to run to his wife and be like, "Hey, you don't know me this way. I need you to know me this way." And he just kind of checked himself. He was like, "I'm going to go for this seems bigger than I'm actually understanding, so I'm going to go for a walk." And so he went for a walk first and just processed it with Jesus, and realized it was an expectation he couldn't give to his wife. There are certain spaces that only Jesus can fill. So when it comes to, because you shared a story earlier that was just really beautiful about unmet needs, and I was wondering if you could go into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I do a lot of premarital counseling, and it tends to be younger people. It tends to be kids that were in my youth group, which is it's really cool to, get to see students, who came in sixth grade, and then they find someone along the way, and they've had godly examples all around them and before them, and then get to be a part of their marriage journey. And in doing so, there's a couple things that I try to encourage them to read. There's a couple books that feel like they're really helpful just practically for marriage. One of those is The 5 Love Languages. The other is His Needs, Her Needs. And between those two, you kind of get a good sense of learning to meet needs of the other person. But I think on top of that, there's something that I've realized. So just little context, 5 love languages would be quality time, physical touch, acts of service, gifts and words of encouragement. And in general, people will be kind of wired to where they will receive love more in one of those ways or a couple of those ways than the others. Like I can tell you, like for me, quality time and physical touch are really good. I like gifts, but they don't, like, that's not my language. They're just not as big a deal to me. But I think on top of all of that, there's something else. And I think there's a lot of ways beyond just those to give and express love. I think that the greatest need in a relationship is whatever feels like the unmet need at that moment. And so I could, my quality time could be good. My physical touch could be good. But if instead of words of encouragement, if I've been getting cut down and cut down and cut down, or just flat, all of a sudden it's going to mean a lot more to me. And so actually I was sharing with you, Shane, that in my first marriage, so my wife ended up passing away of an autoimmune disease. And before she did, she had these periods of sickness where we would end up in the hospital for like 2 weeks at a time and then out. And we spent a whole year doing this. And when she got sick, she would get scared. And because of just some, dysfunction in her family growing up, so when she would get sick, she would get scared and she would try to push away people who were close to her. And so I just felt like it was days of, you're in a hospital, like you got a surgery coming up, and this should be like the closest time, right? Like this should be the time where you're bonding together and, I love you and I'm here for you. And actually there was nobody else around. We were like 4 hours away from home. And instead we were fighting. We would, if the nurses were in there, like we were good, we would, put on the face and everything. But when they're not, like it was just bickering and fighting. And I just felt so hurt and I felt so wounded. And I remember leaving her room and going down to the lobby and going to the coffee shop. And I think it was a Starbucks in a hospital in Northern Ohio. And I went to order my coffee and there was a barista there. And I got to say that she was of average looks. Like she wasn't ugly, but I would have never turned my head twice at her in a normal circumstance. But she was just so kind to me when she took my drink order, and then when she gave it to me, she gave me eye contact and a smile and just spoke kindly to me. And I remember when I walked away, I felt so drawn to her because I had just been through a period where I wasn't getting anything kind said to me. And I sat in the lobby holding my coffee, and it really felt like one of those like angel devil moments where you got one on each shoulder. And I kept trying to think up reasons to go back to the coffee shop. And at the same time, this other voice screaming, the last thing on earth you need to do is go back to that coffee shop. You do not have the right to get affection from this girl. And so I just, by the grace of God, I did not. I prayed about it. And actually, this is one of those just handy practical options. I don't know. It works for me. When I'm in a severe moment of temptation like this, and I think I was at this point, I pray out loud. I am bought by the blood of Jesus, and I claim the blood of Christ over my life and over my thoughts. And Lord, deliver me and help me. But there's something about like praying the blood of Jesus out loud that just is, there's power in the blood and there's power in prayer. So I didn't go back. Shane, my wife unexpectedly died less than 2 weeks later. Now, can you imagine had I gone back? Now, she would have never known. My wife would have never known. It's not like I would have brought this, Starbucks girl up to the hospital bed. And it's probably not even like I would have gone for coffee with this girl. But I had a temptation on the front end to give my affections to this girl, to get something from her that I only had rights to get from my wife. Now, can you imagine had I buried my wife and had to walk forward with that secret? how destructive that would be.
It would have jacked you up for the rest of your life.
Absolutely would. Absolutely would. The greatest need that you have, I really think, is the unmet need. It's that felt need in the moment. And it's one where there are times where, because of what's going on, maybe you can't go to your spouse about that. And that's why you need to have godly men. If you're a man, you need to have godly men. And if you're a woman, you need to have godly women. I would never, ever, ever have gone to a godly woman with that pain that I have inside me. Why? Because I would have been met with sympathy and understanding, and my heart would have been drawn to that person.
Yeah.
So you can't do some of these things alone, but you have to be aware. Like, that is how affairs start. I don't think they start all the time because you see this smoking hot woman and are just going to throw away your whole life to go chase it down.
Yeah.
Starts because of a hurt. Starts because of an emptiness. Starts because something feels insignificant inside you, and you start to get it from a well that is not your own.
Jay, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for just letting us see you a bit. I really appreciate that. That's at least from our part, that's the stuff that reshapes me. So thank you. I want to ask one last question, if you're okay with that. Okay. The question, it can be as complex or simple as you want it to be.
Okay.
I heard, well, the question, I'll give the question first. What does it look like to steward a relationship with your kids intentionally? I heard Al Mohler, he said once, don't buy your kids stuff, buy them experiences and have those experiences with them. Obviously, he's emphasizing the points. You can buy your kids stuff, right. But I've always really liked that. And so, what would you say? Just a good way, even if it's one thing, to foster active relationship with your kids, because they're going to find acceptance and intimacy in pixels, and so what is it like that really is something that parents have to almost compete with at a certain level. So what does it look like to actively capture the affections, the imaginations, and the relationship of your own kids?
Yeah. Great question. The one thing that's coming to my mind right now is just the encouragement to be present, like all the way present, not just in the same room, not just in the same house, but to be present. I have 4 kids. Each of them are very different, and they like different things. The boys kind of like the same stuff, but even still, they like different things. And it's fun to study your kids, just in the same way that if you're attracted to a girl, you study a girl, you find out what they like and everything. In the same way, like, I want to study my kids. I want to see their heart. I want to see how to get to their heart. As much as I love teaching as a pastor, I'm aware that a really well done PowerPoint presentation is not going to transform anything about them.
Yeah.
But I want to be present where I draw them into my life, and I'm drawn into theirs, and together we draw into other people's lives. A couple of things that will be helpful with that. One is, especially as a man, understanding, I think it was so funny because probably a goofy book, but I remember a long time ago listening to the guy that wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And he said a couple things that were really helpful. He was talking about how the tendency of men, we give our best at work a lot of times, and then we come home on fumes, or we will work all the way to the moment when we're right in the door. Especially now with phone calls and stuff like that, you might take the last one right up to the moment you're in the door. And so when you hit the door, you're not ready. I mean, so often I'll have it where my kids are standing at the door of my truck waiting for me to get off the phone with somebody, so that I can be with them. And truthfully, just because I hang up, I'm not ready. I need to if I can figure out some kind of little man cave experience before I meet my family. So for me, I want to get up before my family in the morning because like I need to reset myself with God. I need some quiet. I need some coffee. I probably need a walk. And so when I see them and meet them, I'm ready to be present and engaged. And then after work, like I want to be there. I want them to feel like they're more important than the work that I'm doing. And that's over the long term. It's not like, I mean, there's times where you got to get work done. So that's one, like, if you can learn that you need to decompress before you arrive in the people's lives that are most important to you. So on your way home from work, drive a little slower, don't take that call. Even if it's, throw on no music or like stupid sports talk or something that just takes you out of the grind of whatever you've been doing so that you're ready in those first 15 minutes of being in with them. And then also a big part of being present is being on mission together. And so like we have worked to create a family mission statement in our house. Our kids cannot recite it to you, but I can tell you what it is and I'll tell them, and at some point they'll recite it. But so we look at our family mission as this: God has blessed us with resources, relationships, and responsibilities. And so we're going to use our gifts to enjoy life with Jesus and one another and to heal the world with the gospel of Christ. And so we look to use our home as a healing place for people. And so we pick, we can't do that for everybody. We've got a little girl in our home who we've adopted. That's a big part of it. It limits us with other people, but we try to bring the kids on that, like, this isn't mom and dad's mission. This is the family mission. This is our team mission. And even when you get out of the house and you're 40 years older than you are now, I hope that we're all still on mission together. So like arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver's full of them. Look at your kids as your little arrows that God's given you to bless and impact the world.
Amen, dude. Not a liability, but a benefit, a gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I dig that a lot. Jay, thanks for being with us, man.
Man, it's been a pleasure.
Really enjoyed this conversation. My producer always lets me know when it's been 30 minutes. So like I'm talking to you and I'm like, it hasn't even been 30 minutes. And then he looks up at some point and tells me it's been 50 minutes. And I'm like, wow, like I've really been in this conversation. And that just goes to show how much I've really enjoyed it. So just thank you for being with us. Can you take just a minute to share how people can get involved with what you're doing, continue to learn?
Yeah. So I started a podcast about 3.5 years ago called Let's Parent on Purpose. And it revolves around equipping and empowering moms and dads in their marriage, their parenting, and their personal discipleship with Jesus. So even if you're not quite a parent yet, there's a lot for you to build in during that. So you can find it at letsparentonpurpose.com or just look on Apple or Spotify. Additionally, especially if you're already a parent, I have created a free ebook that I would love to give you. It's called Fun Family Conversations. And it's just a list of silly and serious questions that you can use during 4 key times a day, during your meal times, your drive times, your morning routines, and your bedtime routines, just to get the conversation rolling. If you'd like a copy of that Fun Family Conversations ebook, you can just text the word THINGS, THINGS, to the number 66866. That's THINGS to 66866. And not only will I send you that ebook, but I've got a bunch of other resources that will come right after that. So love to give away stuff for free as the Lord enables it.
I like free stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who doesn't like free stuff. Jay, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It really has been a pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll have links to your stuff in the show notes so people will be able to check that out as well. Guys, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Jay. I hope it's been beneficial for you. If it has, please leave us a review. Jay challenged me recently with application and call to action. So I know that you guys, if you're not married, then you know people who are married. So I would encourage you just to share this with one other person that you think it would benefit, it'd be beneficial for them. It's a real need. And so I know it'd be its own sort of gift just to share this with them. So I'd encourage you to do it. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to hanging with you guys next time. Jay, take care.
Thank you.